Hey guys, welcome to my channel Miss Recap. Today I'm going to talk about the movie Girl in the Box. This movie is based on a true real life story. Colin, a 22-year-old hitchhiker, is kidnapped by a young couple in May 1977 and forced to work as their slave and babysitter for the next 7 years. Our film starts with the true story of Cameron and Janice, a married couple who practice S&M. They are the middle of nowhere in their automobiles, so Cameron pulls over and asks Janice to help him open the trunk. She refuses distressed, but he persuades her and they move a woman's body from the trunk and drag it into the woods. He buries the body as Janice keeps an eye on things. As the sun rises, they finish burying the body and return to the car. Janice, distraught, says she didn't expect someone to die, but he claims he had to since she was screaming and they were going to be caught, and they drive away. On the morning of May 19, 1997, a girl called Colin stands on the side of the road looking for a ride. Later that day, Cameron and Janice were driving. When they discover her, they cheerfully offer her a ride. When she accepts and they introduce themselves, Colin and confess to hitchhiking from Oregon to California to attend a friend's birthday party. They arrive at a gas station an hour later, where they fill up their tank with gasoline while Collins freshens up in the bathroom and Cameron retrieves a box from the trunk and places it in the back seat. They are back on the road and Cameron informs Colin that they will be stopping to see some ice caves despite her reservations at first. She accepts and they drive to the woods when he unexpectedly approaches Colin with a knife in her throat. He threatens to kill her. If she doesn't cooperate, she agrees terrified and he blindfolds her, gags her and handcuffs her before placing her head inside the box in the back seat. Later that night, they return to their house where Cameron takes Colin into the basement, summons Janice to come down and tears off Colin's clothes before tormenting her, finally placing her head back in the box. Cameron leaves the house the next morning to buy a party chair and food to Colin. He returns at night where he feeds her in the basement. Before whipping her, Janice is upstairs listening to what is going on and she begins to feel bad. Janice asks Cameron what he will do with Colin since she spoke to her and is concerned that she will report them to the police if they let her go. And Cameron responds that they will keep her in the basement. The next morning, Cameron constructs a wooden coffin in which he places Colin, terrified. She begins to recall the day she left home. Her father offered to pay the bus fare, but she declined since she wanted to hitchhike and she was in the gas station bathroom. She had second thoughts about the couple and was going to flee, but she changed her mind. Jack, Colin's father, received a phone call an hour later informing him that his daughter is gone and he and his wife proceed to the police station to file a report. Janice visits to Cameron's office 6 months later to inform him that she is pregnant and that Colin should be released. He is unconvinced and tries to persuade her otherwise. Cameron and Janice return home a month later after Janice's arthritis surgery. He peruses the magazine and discovers an underground captivity contract in one of them. He instructs Janice to put up a fictitious captivity contract and goes to the basement. He tells Colin that he works for a business that oversees the captive trade and that he made up a story about Janice, who used to be a slave and was mistreated before he acquired her. She signs the bogus contract, terrified, and he informs her that she is now their legal captive, threatening that if she tries to go, the firm will pursue her family. The next morning, Cameron is speaking with Colin, informing her of her new responsibilities as his new slave, as well as her new name, Kay, and the collar he has placed around the neck. She gradually begins to complete all of the household chores. A year later, Cameron and Janice are at a home late at night when she gives birth to a baby girl named Amber, and he lets Colin out of the coffin for a brief moment to view his new daughter. The next morning, Cameron is speaking with Colin and he tells her a made-up narrative about a hostage who managed to flee from the captor and sought assistance from the police. However, it came out that the police were part of the organization. They apprehended her and began to cut off her limbs and tongue. She begins to embarrass her new role as a slave despite her fear, and Cameron takes Colin to the woods to chop wood a few days later. Janice begins to be envious of her. Cameron injures himself while chopping wood and Colin considers fleeing. She chooses to assist him instead of fleeing because she is afraid. He talks with Janice later that night and she complains that he wants Colin more than she does. He offers that they share her and she agrees. When he begins to have his way with her, however, Janice becomes enraged and demands that he returns her to the box and never touch her again. Colin has changed dramatically in the 4 years since her kidnapping, and one night she sees Amber all grown up. She asks Janice how long she's been here. Perplexed, Cameron and Janice are leaving Colin alone in the box. The next morning, for her late vacations, Colin then begins to wonder why she's going through this. When she begins to get visions of a priest telling her that the agony and suffering she is being through is God's test of her, then she has a terrifying dream about drowning and kicks about the box door. Cameron and his family return home a few days later, and he goes to his bedroom to discover the box door open. He hunts for Colin, fearful that she has escaped, and eventually finds her in the shower. He talks with Janice later that night after she informed him she was reading about the captive obligations in the book about slaves and masters. He tells her that they need to let Colin out of the box, and she asks if he will sleep with her. He assures that he will, citing a line in the book that enables masters to sleep with their slaves as justification. Janice, feeling guilty, agrees to be friendlier with Colin. Cameron returns to work the next day while Janice takes Collins out of the box and reads the Bible with her. They begins to bond, and Colin also become acquainted with Amber. Colin had been Cameron's maid for 6 years, performing all the household tasks. One day they will go to church together, and Janice begins to feel bad about what she done. They are playing with Amber after church when Cameron arrives home from work. Angry at what he sees, he drags Janice into the bedroom and whips her. An hour later, Colin visits Janice in the bedroom to console her. The next morning, Cameron informed Colin that she is welcome to see her family, since he persuaded the corporation to allow her to do so. She is overjoyed and expresses her gratitude to him for the opportunity. They arrive at her family's home an hour later when he cautions her not to say anything suspicious or the corporation will kill her family, and she is finally reunited with her family. Her family is overjoyed to see her again, and Cameron introduces himself as Mike and leaves her with her family, who are enjoying supper together. An hour later, when Bonnie notices that Colin is not feeling well, she inquires about her whereabouts, but she remains silent. Cameron arrives at Colin's house to pick her up a few days later, and her family questions him about how they met, and he fabricates a narrative about how they met a few months ago and are intending to marry, and then they return to Cameron's house. Cameron is talking with Colin later that night, and he tells her that he wants to marry her. Janice overhears them doors angry. She decides to see her parents and packs her belongings to leave the house. The next morning, Cameron enraged whips Colin and locks her in the shed outside the home. He drives away from the house in the automobile, and Janice feels bad about leaving her alone. So she returns to his house and frees Colin. Janice encourages Colin to go home, but she refuses because she doesn't want to betray Cameron. Instead, Janice tells her about how he murdered a girl a few years ago and buried her in the woods. Also, there is no such thing as captive company, so Colin takes a bus so she may go home. After 7 years in captivity, Cameron is apprehended by the authorities and sentenced to 104 years in prison. But Janice is guaranteed immunity from prosecution because she testified against her husband. And the film comes to a close. Thanks for watching. If you like it, so don't forget to subscribe my channel.